It is day 151 of the second Trump administration, and today the White House said Donald Trump would make a decision on U.S. involvement in Iran within the next 2 weeks. It seems like the administration is slightly pumping the brakes a bit after Trump spent days publicly talking about the possibility of a U.S. strike. By the way, this is at least the 11th time in the last 6 weeks that President Trump has made an announcement, some sort of announcement, of a 2-week deadline about some aspect of his administration. Europe is hoping to help de-escalate the Israel-Iran conflict within that 2-week window. Tomorrow, European foreign ministers are set to meet with their Iranian counterparts in Geneva. This comes as Israeli leaders have vowed to intensify their attacks after one of the country's hospitals was hit by an Iranian missile. My colleague Richard Engel is in Tel Aviv with all the details.
A new video shows the direct hit from an Iranian ballistic missile on the biggest hospital in southern Israel. Inside, staff and patients run for cover. Parts of the ceiling caving in. Smoke filling the hallways.
And this is where the missile impacted. It went right through the hospital's roof and sent debris throughout this area. This was a significant strike.
There were no deaths or serious injuries reported. Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu said the hospital strike proved Iran's intentions.
They're targeting civilians because they're a criminal regime. They're the arch terrorists of the world.
Israel's defense minister claimed the order to strike the hospital came directly from Iran's supreme leader. This man absolutely should not continue to exist, he said. Iran claims it was targeting a military site near the hospital. NBC News has confirmed the hospital is within a mile of an Israeli military intelligence compound. Israel says Iran launched dozens of missiles today towards civilian centers, most intercepted, one hitting a residential area in Tel Aviv. High-rises damaged.
We have 5 buildings that were hit by the missile.
Israel is continuing its attacks in Iran, targeting the nation's nuclear program and military. New video showing smoke near Tehran's police headquarters. And these images of an Israeli strike on the Handab heavy water reactor, which Iran announced it had planned to restart.
Meanwhile, here at home, Democrats in Congress say they need to hear a whole lot more from this White House about exactly what plans they're even talking about. The administration is likely going to brief lawmakers sometime next week, but many are already very frustrated that it has taken this long. All right, let's get smarter with the help of our leadoff panel and bring him in tonight. Melanie Zanona joins us, NBC Capitol Hill correspondent. Peter Baker, chief White House correspondent for the New York Times. And Nayyera Huq, former White House senior director and former State Department senior advisor. Mr. Baker, I turn to you first. This is obviously a huge decision, so of course it takes time. It has to be weighed. But I said it a moment ago. This is the 11th time in the last 6 weeks that Donald Trump has set a 2-week deadline in some sort of policy announcement. What do we know about this one?
Well, that's a great statistic, Steph, and I'm glad you use it because it puts it in context, right? Obviously, we have a president here who has been unpredictable, who has been willing to, go one way and then the other way and make up his mind, then unmake his mind up and so forth. We've seen so many examples of that just in the last few days even. So, take it with a grain of salt, 2 weeks. But what the 2 weeks thing, I think, tells us is he put the pause button on it, right? In other words, we are not on the edge of a strike tomorrow or the next day. That seemed to be the implication here. He wants to either play it out and see if negotiations could be restarted, see if he can get some sort of a deal, see if the threat of this U.S. participation in the strike changes that dynamic. He's trying to leverage, obviously, the Iranians into some sort of deal. It's unclear what kind of deal could come up with in the next 2 weeks that would satisfy him and that the Iranians would be willing to go along with. But it does obviously indicate just how uncertain he is about getting the United States involved in this war.
Nayyera, what do you think about this 2 weeks?
Oh, I think it's fascinating considering that he's had, ever since his first administration, to be renegotiating a deal. There was a deal in place. Iran was constrained in building a nuclear weapon because we had UN inspectors in there pretty regularly. Trump pulls out, Iran just decides to go forward. And now here we are with Iran ostensibly 6 months away from being able to actually build the casing and the trigger functions of a nuclear weapon. Now, Israel just went ahead and made its own decision about when to target strikes. The United States had the opportunity to work with allies at the G7. Trump declined to do that. Trump joined in on Netanyahu's bravado, talking about taking over the skies, and we could take out the supreme leader anytime we wanted. Using that language of we, I think, in this moment is also problematic. But suddenly, Trump decided to cool heels a little bit. I think it's their acknowledgement and realization that negotiation takes stamina, it takes patience, and Trump doesn't necessarily have either one of those.
Melanie, Steve Bannon, who very, very publicly and aggressively has made his views clear, he does not want the U.S. to get involved in this situation. He was spotted at the White House today, and we know that the president often listens to the last person he is speaking to. So what are you hearing about who else has Trump's ear?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. It matters who Trump is talking to because he does tend to listen to the last person that he spoke to, although that's usually the case when he tends to already agree with the person he's speaking to, right? I think in this instance, what our reporting is really telling us is that he does not want to be boxed in by either camp. He does not want to be boxed in by the isolationists, the Marjorie Taylor Greenes of the world, but also the hawks like Lindsey Graham. He's really leaning on his generals in this moment, which I think is interesting and maybe surprising to some people. He's sidelined someone like Tulsi Gabbard, for example, who was seen as overstepping her bounds, trying to get out ahead of the president, which we know he does not like take kindly to. But he is really caught in the middle of his own MAGA movement in this moment because America First was really a fundamental principle of his movement. At the same time, though, he also ran on being pro-Israel, especially in the aftermath of the October 7th attacks. And so, he finds himself in this really difficult moment, incredibly high stakes, not just for his presidency and for the whole world. So clearly he's not in a rush in this moment, but he definitely likes to keep us on our toes. So the 2 weeks, I think, maybe be a little bit of a shock value there, keeping us all in suspense. I don't think anyone at the end of the day knows exactly what he's going to do until he actually does it, though, Steph.
Naira, it's not just Tulsi Gabbard. Pete Hegseth seems to be on the outs when it comes to Trump's decision-making here. What do you think is going on? Because in theory, one would think those senior cabinet level members of the administration would be his go-to people.
No, well, there might be some concern about Pete Hegseth accidentally putting out any information on Signal and getting ahead of the president that way. But the reality is that there's a very small team in place anyway. Secretary of State Marco Rubio is also the national security advisor. You're not listening to his head of intelligence, the Secretary of Defense. So it's a very small group. And the challenge that we have is that group of generals can only give the president military options. They're not necessarily equipped to say, this is what Iran will do next diplomatically. This is what the long-term history has been. I mean, really needing those seasoned diplomats and foreign service officers who know the region, who know what the allies will do. And that's just not the kind of team that Trump tends to bring together. But it's also the concern now of how much room do you have for diplomacy when you already have this looming military threat hanging over everyone's head?
Peter, we know there are huge risks when it comes to any sort of strike, but there are experts out there saying that this situation is a lot like what we saw in Iraq and Afghanistan. Can you lay it out for us? We need our memories jogged.
Well, I mean, look, we got into those wars and thought they would be easy, thought they would be quick, they would be a cakewalk, all those things. And obviously they didn't turn out to be that. Now, this is a different situation in the sense that we're not sending in ground troops. We're not trying to actually take over the country. We're not trying to, establish a new nation in that sense. But you never know where a war goes once you start it. And the idea of an attack on a major Middle Eastern power, even one that's strictly at the moment limited to its nuclear facilities and through air power, still opens up a Pandora's box. And you don't know, obviously. And particularly Iran has had, through its proxies, Hezbollah, Hamas, the Houthis, and so on, the ability to inflict pain on its enemies over the years. The flip side is what the Israelis would say is this is the best moment to go after them because, in fact, they have been degraded. Those proxies have been beaten down by Israeli forces since the October 7th Hamas attack on Israel. Iran's air defenses are basically ineffective at this point. And so since they've already gone in, the argument to the United States is why not take out Fordo, the big fortified nuclear facility in the mountains, while you're at it, because you've already committed, in effect, to trying to eliminate or at least delay this nuclear program. But again, it's a Pandora's box. Once you open it, you don't know where it goes.